reframing this debate. This is not a question of if we are rebels, if they are the British government. The ballot and your decision to vote for either team is this utilitarian discussion in answering the question of who has presented the better, most desirable option in policy. Now, there are a few reasons why the U.S. Declaration of Independence is uniquely important to the globe. I think the first and best argument is democratization. There are current democratic uprising in the Middle East in places like Syria, Libya, and other countries such as Egypt that have overthrown their dictators and now making the transition to a more democratically run government. U.S. democracy and the norms that U.S. international diplomacy extends to these countries is essential to make sure that those democratic transitions are successful. In the world in which we return to British rule, that would be impossible. It would be impossible for us to aid in places like Egypt, where they've overthrown Mubarak, to make sure they establish a democratic constitution. Now, it would be impossible for us to solve in places like Libya, or intervene to establish a government that can really replace an undemocratic Gaddafi who oppresses citizens. Now, the second argument why the Declaration of Independence is uniquely important is that it's key to our credibility at international human rights negotiations and credibility to other international forums, which are key to solving global problems. I think that this is intuitively true that the norms and the international signal that the U.S. has shown historically of not being suppressed, of fighting for its individual rights and fighting for its freedoms, is key to the universal idea that we should do it globally, we should do it in international forums, which have the infrastructure and bureaucratic and technical capability to do so. There are also reasons why U.S. independence is essential, because the resolution and the question that this resolution and this House should really ask and resolve is if the United States should resolve its Constitution, its Declaration of Independence, and then return to British rule. The component of returning to British rule will destroy the multipolar balance of power in the status quo, which the U.S. is heading. We now live in a world which is multipolar, which is based on multilateral cooperative nature of international frameworks like Kyoto and other programs like this. U.S. hegemony or U.S. leadership. One second, sir. I'm going to finish the U.S. leadership point. U.S. leadership is key to economic predominance, which stops conflicts. U.S. needs nuclear military deterrence. People, countries like Russia, who had nuclear weapons. We saw this to solve the Cold War before it escalated nuclear conflict. We saw China. We need to solve a rising China in the status quo and stop them from having an aggressive military policy set toward Taiwan, which escalates and destroys the entire stability of the Asian continent. Yes.
So you've asserted that Britain isn't a democracy, and that's not true. And the way I'll prove that is by pointing out that you said that a US democracy is essential to things like the Arab Spring, it's essential to things like international human rights. Can you tell me any international human rights agreements that Britain has not been part of? Can you tell me any humanitarian interventions Britain has not been part of? And finally, can you tell me which of Britain and America is a member of the Kyoto Treaty that you're so fond of?
You're not really discussing or framing the British decision into the right context. It's not a Britain exceeding the U.S., it's the EU, the European Union, exceeding the United States, because Britain's law is constrained internationally by the considerations and the international mandates and requirements of EU membership, which means that Britain can't do anything unilaterally without the Security Council of the EU making sure that legislation is appropriate for the entirety of the EU member states. Now, the United States will be constrained internationally. Now, there is a human rights declaration that member countries of the EU have to sign before they can accede to the EU and have EU membership. The problem is that that very process of EU membership destroys and negates the possibility of one country being able to lead the international system in a direction that is positive. Because there's too many multiplicitous nations and interests that if the United States does not assert itself as a global power, both militarily, economically, and in the context of social issues like trade and other human rights negotiations, it will be impossible for these things to ever prosper right to the top because of too many interests in the European Union. Their policy is constrained considerably by over 20 members. Sure.
Sir, you said that whatever the EU says goes. The EU opposed both the intervention in Iraq and Afghanistan, yet the British participated in both. How are those two things possibly both true?
Okay, that this shows that the EU is not very good at constraining British policy. It still doesn't provide a reason why British national leadership is better than the United States. Because even if it's true that the EU can unilaterally intervene, like in places like Iraq and Afghanistan, the EU has retaliation that they can lock the EU or the British out of trade negotiations that would be beneficial for it, which means that the EU would just cause a bunch of trade war. That's happening in the status quo with solar. It's the EU is trying to import a bunch of solar, but they're terrorists and China's terrorists are making that difficult to do. Now, the U.S. leadership will be able to resolve all of that by negotiating free trade agreements. We'll go to your first points about how the Queen is respected. The Queen is just a figurehead, so all your arguments of why U.S. figurehead or president is bad links more and is more applicable to a queen who is literally just a political figurehead who has no say in the discussion of Parliament. Also, you've not made any arguments why the EU is good at foreign diplomatic policy. There's really a logical common sense argument why U.S. international military predominance and U.S. soft power norms are necessary to stop the rise of China. Because China is taking over the world, wielding trillions of dollars, not to securitize China, present China as a threat, but their economy is strong, and in the status quo, they have the ability to call in the United States debt. Now, how would this bureaucratically and logistically work for a large country of millions of people to accede into another country and become part of that territory? In modern day, it would be a bureaucratic nightmare. It would be politically, infeasibly, and technically impossible to do so. It would destroy both democracies because that large population is not a bureaucratic and political institution that is able to regulate or to figure out how that process works if everyone gets a vote. It would destroy the economies of both nations because how do you figure out a tax code from two different, we don't have the same metric of money. How do you figure out how to get all the U.S. coins to British coins and tax all the people and all the businesses appropriately? How do you figure out the ownership of private property? I mean, technically, this is impossible to do. It's laughable. I have no idea why they chose to defend this position. Now, the only position they could win, I guess, is that British policy is necessary because the U.S. gets some sort of imperial or global hegemon, and that's bad, and they can depict the picture of the United States being a global tyrant. I would suggest this isn't true because historically it links that is more true of the British Empire because they are the ones that initiated a lot of the warfare trade that has placed us today in history. But I think it's more true that the United States has overcome that history, and the Declaration of Independence represents a movement, a historical movement of consciousness toward an aim of a better world. In conclusion of this speech, what's logically impossible, U.S. international predominance militarily solves a bunch of problems, and all the arguments about how we're bureaucratic and undemocratic link more to British point.